everyone. It's really great that we've got another event together. I noticed that some names are familiar. You've been with us with some of the other events, so welcome. Congratulations on International Coaching Week 2024. It's been an amazing week so far. I trust you have plenty of learning and insights. So I'd like to get to know a little bit about you before I kick off. Could you raise your hand if you are currently a coach, practicing coach? Raise your hand on Zoom. If you're currently practicing coaching. Now, you may not be earning an income through it yet. Doesn't matter, as long as you are having clients coaching. Just having a look at what the raised hands look like here. So we've got about 25 people on the call. I'm just looking through some of you, Louise, Jerry, Matt, John, Sunada, Neetha, Claudia, Khadisha. Some names I recognize and have worked with. Welcome, Song. Okay, so welcome for those of you who are coaches, and I'm going to ask. I always love to know. I'm going to bring your hands down. Who amongst you is not running a coaching business, meaning you're seeking for clients, doing one-on-one or group coaching, but you are potentially using coaching conversations. So maybe you're a team leader or you're a professional at work, utilizing. You may also be a coach, but you are having coaching conversations, and that could be both at work and not at work. So as long as you consciously are going into coaching conversations, thinking or knowing that you are going into a coaching conversation. Okay, so some hands are going up that I recognize, but some new hands have gone up. Maria is a new hand has gone up. So that's awesome. That's great. Thank you for participating, Tracy. That's great. So I'm going to bring your hands down. So is there anybody that's on the call today that if I call your name, you don't want me to call your name to open up your mic? Is there anybody that doesn't want me to call upon them for us to have a quick conversation? Is there anybody? If you are, if you're in a place where you don't want to talk or you can't talk, just please raise your hand so I'm conscious that I respect that. Okay, thanks, Song. Okay, so apart from Song, everybody else is okay for me to Sunada, okay, Khadisha, no, yeah, Khadisha, and Sharifa, Katrina, John. Okay, I'm kind of all right. So let's have a few conversations before we kick off in terms of why we're here tonight. So we are related. What the outcome of today is, it's a focus on 5 levels of listening. So if you're a coach or you're currently using coaching conversations, you're familiar with the ICF coaching competencies, and one of them very specifically is active listening. Out of the 8 competencies, one of them is active listening. So this is a pretty important competency as far as ICF and the coaching profession is concerned. It's got one competency on its own. So some of you may be on the line today that you are aspiring to understand more and more how this competency works so that you can have more powerful, impactful conversations. How many of you tonight are on this call where you're not familiar with the coaching competencies of ICF and you would like to understand and make a bigger impact in what you do? Is there anybody that doesn't know or hasn't read or heard about. So nobody's hand is going up. So everybody here is familiar with this. Okay, so I'm going to bring an element to this conversation tonight that is, I believe, going to help us coaches, team leaders, human beings become more effective listeners. So can I ask you to write in the chat, based on your thinking of this, what is your definition of being a more effective listener? What do you think a more effective listener means? What if you wrote in the chat a sentence or a few words that represent what it is that you think? An effective listener. So listening so well that you even hear what is not said. Great. Nirala, thank you. Claudia, hearing behind the words. Great. Actively stay open to what the other person is communicating to us versus what we think they're saying. So in a way, get out of your own head is what I'm hearing Jerry's sentence is get out of your own head and stay open to what the other person's communicating. Maria saying being present with the client. So presence is another of the 8 competencies. So Maria is saying by being more present, my effective listening and impact of my listening will go up. So that's the relationship from Maria's perspective. Listening without judgment. So Neitha, listening without judgment. So judgment, what is judgment? So because we all judge, it's something that our brain does automatically. It's what we can do consciously to put it aside and then come back to where the effectiveness plays. Judgment is where we go back into our head. So when we're judging, we are thinking about what we believe something is good or bad, right or wrong. So we're back into our own heads as opposed to listening to the other person. So when somebody says you're judging me, it means you're not listening to them. You're talking to them about what you think rather than what they said, what they wanted to say. So this thing about without judgment, this without judgment is actually a conscious putting aside judgment and refocusing, being more present and really listening to the other person without bringing you into the equation in terms of what you think and what you believe. So this is teaching our brain to do something, to behave in a different way because it's to its benefit. So we're training ourselves by seeing a benefit in it. And I think the benefit here from Louise and Neetha are I will be more effective as a listener. So that's why I would put this aside. So I wonder if you're also listening to some of the psychology behind listening. So as we are listening to others, we pick, the energy and the frequency, and we interpret what's happening based on what it is we're observing. And that's what we do as coaches and human beings in communication with others. So Manisha is saying being in the moment, giving your 100% attention mentally, physically, and shutting the shatter in your head. So in essence, is that presence again. So great, Manisha. That's absolutely right. John, able to listen to facts, feeling, and aspiration that are said or not said. So specifically, John is saying I can be more effective by not only listening to the fact, but actually picking up the feeling, the emotion, and what I think the aspiration is behind what's being said. So what's the driving point? What's the motivation? What's the energy? Great. Matt saying hearing the message that the person is intending to share and suitably confirming that. So that's one of the skills that we learn as coaches, and it's an amazing ability for all of us, how human beings, is to how do we get to really understand what's being said. So I think this is what Matt is referring to here. I want to understand what it is you're saying. So if I want to understand, I'm listening intentionally, actively, and I want to make sure that I understand it and none of my interpretations has fogged what it is that you really want to tell me. So that's my job as the listener, to be able to make sure that I have understood the other person. My responsibility if I want to make that listening more effective. Great. Sharif is saying, calming the voices in my head to really listen to the client. So that's kind of the judgment element and the inner conversation. Great. More of the judgment. Khadisha is saying, hearing and feeling at deeper level what's important to the client. So listening deeper. So when we say listen deeper, that means something. So for Khadisha, this listening deeper is I'm hearing and feeling at a deeper level what is important to the client. So the deeper listening is about picking up the importance, the values, what's driving the show for the other person. So I'm attuned. So I'm listening deeper because it's important for me, the listener, to understand what's driving the show for the other person. So when you think about what this sentence means, so if I'm listening deeper to pick up what's really important for the other person, I am putting myself out there of service. So there's a reason why I'm listening to see what's important for you. Now, if you're in an organization, I'm listening to see what's important to you because I'm going to be working with you. And if I get to understand what's important to you, then I may be able to pull some levers of what you do and how you do things so that you feel more engaged at work. You feel more joy. You feel more energized while you're at work. If you're a coach and you're listening to what's important to the client, as a coach, what we want to do is understand what is the relationship. What is the relationship between what the goal is that the person's come to the coaching session with? So I hear you want to lose weight. Okay, so that's your goal. You want to lose weight. So why is that important to you? And if you're listening for the importance of that, somebody might be saying that I'm at an age, if I don't watch this, I'll kill myself. Right? Or if I'm not at this level, I am not going to be able to play with my grandchildren the way I want to. So you're starting to hear values. What's for them right now? What's their value system? And the relationship of that value to the goal that they've come to the session. Same thing at work. If the importance and what it is that they're going to do, if this alignment occurs, there's going to be power. That person is going to be moving forward more powerfully because they're aligning their values with the goal. And most of the reason why they get stuck, or why we get stuck, is because there's some misalignment here, or multiple values playing against each other. And we need to understand in order to then make better choices. Most of the time, we don't understand what's going on because it's in the subconscious. So when we talk about it, it comes up and there's an awareness like, now I understand what's happening. That's why I'm not feeling so good about this. Now that I understand it, I know what to do. So this is the level of importance of listening. So at the base of our communication with other people, listening has two levels. it can help you drive one way and the other way. And I'm going to share with you a slide that from ICF on the competencies. I want to just show that so that we have a context as we're going forward together tonight. So if you look at these competencies, you'll notice that ICF has put the 8 competencies in 4 pillars. Foundational. Have you got your foundation up and running? How are you co-creating relationships? Are you communicating effectively? That's where listening actively sits. Are you communicating effectively? And then are you cultivating the learning and growth? Are you in development mode? Are you in transformation mode? Is this happening for you? So those are the 4 pillars of ICF's 8 competencies. So where listening sits is the one side of listening is as you listen more actively, you are driving the co-creation of relationships. How? Primarily, you are building trust and safety. So psychologically, as you listen and the other person feels that they're being listened to, you will drive trust and safety upwards in that relationship. And we all know in every relationship, as trust and the space is more and more saved, as that goes up, then the other person allows themselves to open up and say things and allow things to come out. Whereas prior to that, they subconsciously, at some level, they may have put a lid on it. So by listening actively, one side of the equation is that we are co-creating a relationship, a stronger relationship. We're allowing that relationship to actually go to a place where the other person is going to enhance the output they're going to get out of the communication. So that's this side. The other side of active listening is where we are going to communicate more effectively because we are picking up, and some of you have said this, listen to what they said and what they didn't say. Listen to the senses. Listen to their emotions. So I'm going to go further today, and I'm going to say, let's go deeper. The deeper you go in your listening, the more impact you're going to make. And the reason behind that is if you yourself, the listener, develops how you are listening to the other people and what you are actually focusing on when you're listening, you will be able to get to the bottom of what it is that's driving the show for the other person. And through your questions and observations, which is the other tools and skills that we learn in the communicating effectively, you'll be able to raise the awareness of the other person or put this light on areas of blind spot where they will be able to see something that they hadn't seen before, either in a breadth of things or in a deeper level, and that will allow them to make a decision about how they're going to change something within where they're at in order to develop, in order to transform, in order to get the results they want in the way they want it. So that's how active listening is going to make the impact. So I'm going to talk about the depth a little bit later on, but let's just go together and look at what's happening around us in the world we live in. So if we go out to society, if we're at work, even when we're in a coaching session, sometimes I hear coaches fall into some of these steps. So I'm going to go through these 5 levels first. So before that, I want to just lay the ground. I've just mentioned it, but I want to say it because I believe this is really important. When we talk about needs, human needs, so the word need it means I must have it, right? So one of the most basic of all human needs is the need to understand and be understood. That's a need that all of us human beings have. So if we have a need and somebody is doing something that demonstrates that they are understanding what we're saying, then they feel that their need has been or is being satisfied. And the best way to understand people is to listen to them, really listen to them. So this is the context. So we are talking about a level of human need that's going to drive the show. Now, fortunately, unfortunately, the way when we go out into society, we're going to see some of these 5 levels show up. So what's the first level? The first level, I put it, is that we just simply are not in the zone. We're just simply not listening. So what's happening is somebody's talking to you, and in your head, what you're doing is you are thinking about what is the best thing to say or how to finish their sentence. What you are doing is you're focusing on you. So this level of listening, this number 1, is where you are really focusing on you and not the other person, which means the other person will feel that, well, they probably feel irritated. And they'll probably feel that they haven't been listened to and they have not been understood. Most of the time that I see communications get to a place where it's tricky, 2 people talking to one another and emotions start to rise, is because there's not enough listening, and it's level 1 listening that's happening. They're not in the zone. I'd like you to take this as the first warning sign, whereby we want to be in the zone whenever we're in an environment where somebody else is talking to us. We want to stay in that zone. So that's the first warning bell that might come up, and you might see other people behaving in that way, and we can influence that communication by the way we go into that communication with them. But that's another conversation. But first of all, we're talking about how we can take control of the power we have, which is the power of choice. What's our choice in the way we're going to come into this communication? What's the intention? My intention is to stay in the zone. So what happens in the second level? The second level of listening is I am now listening to you, and I have spotted something that I am putting my own experiences and linking it to what I'm listening to you. So I'm going back to me. So I've listened to you for a bit, but I've picked up something that I recollect about my own experience. And what I'm doing is I am going to go back to me. So I've switched off from you and I'm listening to me again. So somebody's saying to me, "Oh, you know, I went to this meeting with Mr. X, and the meeting was a disaster." And my immediate thought at that point is when I went to that meeting with that Mr. X, and it was a disaster too. And I'm starting to think about that. So I'm no longer listening. I'm thinking about what my experiences was. And most of the time, I actually hear the other person turn around and say, "Yeah, I've been to a meeting with Mr. X, and this is what happened to me as well. And by the way, you know, it was worse than what you experienced." So now it's really all about me. I'm not listening to why they're talking about Mr. X and their experiences, or even being curious about how they feel and what happened. I'm now talking about me. Most conversations are in this way, and it's about me as opposed to them. So the consequences of that is they will feel disrespected and ignored in some way. They're there wanting you to listen and potentially go further and empathize. And sometimes they just purely want you to listen. but sometimes they want you to empathize and say, you know, gosh, that sounds like a really, you know, it sounds like an experience that you don't want to be repeated, right? And you want to empathize. And sometimes they want you to go further and um, discover what else they felt. And in a coaching session, you know, they want to move from what happened to what they want to happen. And that's your job as a coach. Now you've understood what's happened and what's driving that, and now you want to help and support them to start thinking in a different way of how they might handle that meeting. That was the objective of the meeting. So this number 2, listening, happens a lot, and it's again, it's finding your awareness of picking it up and stopping yourself going there. So again, you maintain respect. So that's competency number 1 in a coaching session. If your client feels disrespected, you are competency number 1 is now being not applied, right? So as a coach, you're going into the red zone. So respect at all times. So what about number 3? Level 3 listening. It's a lot of the times, as we have experienced ourselves, we go to a parent, we go to a friend, we go to siblings, and we open up on something. And the first thing they do is that they give you their advice. This is what I would do, or you should do this. So like level 1, this can be very irritating because that's not what they've come for. They haven't come for your advice. They've come for you to listen. And this happens a lot in conversations. And it leaves them feeling that really they haven't created this solution. This is not the way, it's not their how of going towards the solution. It's your how. Now, some of you might be thinking this, that actually some people come to me and they want me to give them advice. Even as a coach, they come into the session and they really want me to give them the advice. Now, if this is a real coaching client and they've come there to move forward powerfully, find their potential and abilities, what might be happening, and this is some of you've mentioned, well, you need to listen to what might be happening inside their world, inside their brain. And one of the things that might be happening is that they're running away from responsibility, running away from making the decision on their own so they can blame somebody else. Maybe they think that they don't know. Maybe they think they do not know because others have told them they don't know. And they've believed that they don't know. So therefore now they want others to make their decisions because they've got this belief that they can't make good decisions. Now, it's our job as a coach, but also I think as a human being in the wider context to teach ourselves and our brains that people are capable. They are able to make their choices. And in order to empower them, we have a choice of how we show up. And at this level 3 listening, if we're advising, we are indirectly telling them that they can't make their own choices. So I think this, you know, I'm taking this this level 3 to a point where I believe we can make an impact by the way we show up. So this is where our power is. This is where what we can do. It's not about them. It's about how we show up. So I want you to think about this. Think about, you know, your own experiences and what might have showed up in some scenarios. When is it that you do go to autopilot of advice? When does that happen typically? I'd love you to kind of consider this for a second, because I think we all fall into this trap. When does that happen for you? Here's the thing. We're all different, and we all come with certain amount of conditioning. And if we're on autopilot, like you may be a parent, and you may have teenagers, and you might automatically believe that I need to give advice to my teenagers. That's the right thing to do. That's what we should do. Not that I'm saying that you should never give advice. Human beings should never give other people advice. That's not what I'm saying tonight. What I'm saying is, are we aware that when we are giving advice, that is what is required in that moment? Have we listened to the other person? Is advice really what they're looking for? Have we asked enough questions? Have we observed? Do we understand enough? Or are we on autopilot thinking we know, which is the judgment part? I know this is what you need. Let me give you my advice. So I wonder what you're thinking. So let's hear from in the chat or from some of you. What are you taking away so far? We've gone through 3 levels. I'm seeing in the chat that some of you have been commenting about some of the topics that you've been hearing. Great. So let's hear from Neetha. Neetha, can you open up your line? I think if you're talking, you're still on. There you go.
Yes, I'm sorry for that, Dee. No, I was just thinking that when for level 2 and level 3 of listening, when we are in that space where we either want to give advice or we are bringing ourselves into the conversation, we need to examine as coaches or listeners what's behind that, what's driving that behavior for us, right? And if we go to the heart of that and examine what's driving it, it's easier then for us to recognize it and ensure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I totally agree. Competency number 2, right? If we're reflecting on what it is that's happening, and we pick up the learning, did I really listen fully in this conversation? Was I totally present? Did I bring any of my own baggage into that conversation? Did I miss any of the nuances? What was I listening for? Like, that's a great question to ask after every conversation. Just to, just what did I listen for in that conversation? Was I listening for fixing? Was I listening for learning? Was I listening for getting to understand what they really mean? What was I listening for? It's a beautiful question to ask, because what we'll find is that, if we're on autopilot, we go in and we listen, and the autopilot is telling us what we're listening for, as opposed to our intentional reason for listening in that conversation, which is, as I asked all of you, was you want to be more of an effective listener. So to be a more effective listener is really to become more aware of what was your intention in that listening and what's happening in the various listenings you are. So some of you might say, hey, I go to my coaching sessions and I'm 100% present, and I'm really listening to what the person needs, and it's like amazing level of mastery, awesome. And yet when I'm around with my kids, it's just not happening. I wonder what that is. Or if I'm with my husband or wife or that particular friend of mine, or if I am generally, I don't know, from 6 o'clock at night till before I go to bed, my listening is just not quite there. Is it about me being tired? What is it? Because as you learn, you will make better choices. So this is part of this session here, is really about how can we enhance our own lives, and for all of us to understand that really the real power is with us, the listener. We have the power to ask ourselves more questions to learn and be aware where we are listening really effectively and where are we veering off and what could we do to come back. And that journey alone, remember the pull, you're co-creating relationships. So if we are intentionally enhancing our listening abilities, and that's one competencies that we're trying to notch up every time, what we're doing is our relationships are going up a notch because we're building more trust. And the other side is that we are listening to become more effective communicators, which means we influence better and we support others to develop themselves. It's an amazing outcome for all of us, everybody. And I don't think there's an end to it. My experience is that there's always somewhere else that we can go to enhance. So thank you for that, Neetha. Tomorrow, are you going to bring that question to when we have the question time, or can I ask you to please bring that to the question time so we don't lose it? And I'm gonna just pass on to Puya for a second, and then I will carry on for the other 2+1 that I want to talk about today. Puya?
Yes, I just want to say there's been some additional people joining the session since the beginning, so I just wanted to put the link to the form. So if you want to enter the raffle, please just click on this form, answer those 3 questions, and you'll be entered in the raffle. Right now, you have a very high chance to win given the number of people in the session. That's all. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Puya. So we're going to dive into now these next 2. So listening at level 4, listening at level 5. In essence, this is about us starting to utilize the coaching competencies that ICF has outlined. So a lot of you are coaches, and that is what you're doing naturally. So level 4, level 5. I wouldn't be surprised that most of you have circumstances where you're doing this already. Other circumstances, you might be falling into level 1 or level 2 or level 3 even. But there are cases where you can see 4 and 5. So, but before 4 and 5, what's the context here? The context is how do we pull the levers of our listening and manage the talking? So bring the strength into listening and manage the talking. And so what do I mean by that? So listen more, say less. So when you're saying something, you want to be you want to be thinking about a question that's short. It's one question at a time. If you want to help the process of communication going forward, and that's some of the competencies that ICF has outlined in the 8 competencies. And we want to listen at all levels of energy. So we want to be listening at the factual words, the tone and frequency behind the words, a tonality. We want to be listening for the intuition around the conversation. So that intuition will come from our experience with that person from the past, but also the energy we're picking up. And it's to be listened to, and then you have the choice of what you want to do with it. So once you listen, you have many indicators, and the point here is, as we get more and more skilled at this and experienced at this, we start to pick the bits that are out of kilt, that seem to be more important than others, and we pick that up and we bring it into the conversation. And that's when we're asking the questions, or we're making an observation of what's happened. So this is what we're leaning towards now. Now, level 4 says that you are listening and you intentionally want to get more information and understand. That's what you're doing. You're asking, tell me a bit more about that. I didn't quite understand what the relevance of that is. Can you open that up a little bit more? So you're being curious and you're asking questions. Ideally, as you go from ACC to PCC to MCC, ideally, what you're doing is you have picked up on the nuances between the goal that the person came into the session with or the conversation, the context that they're sitting in, and who they are. Ideally, that's what you want to be moving towards. Level 4 could be at the level where you are listening to the goal and you are wanting to get more information and want to understand so they get to their goal, ACC, right? So the consequence of this wanting more information and to understand is this is the coaching level of listening, and you would only disrupt the other person if it's to get more clarity and to make sure that you're still talking about the same thing. If you don't think they've veered off. So apart from that, you're really listening. You're not talking, you're listening. And you realize what it is that they are needing to talk and go and work on to get to the solution. So it's a particular intention of getting information and listening and understanding so that the person can move towards the outcome. So it's an outcome driven level. So how can they work through this so that they can get to the outcome? So let's go back to human relationships. When we are in a relationship or in a conversation with others, what we think they mean is often irrelevant. What we think they mean, or the reality from our perspective, is often irrelevant. What we're there to do is learn what is their reality. How do they see themselves when they look at themselves in the context they're in, what they believe about themselves, what they think about their goal. These are all these questions that we could be asking because we want to learn what their reality of the situation is. That's the intention of service. We want to be in service to the other person. Therefore, we really want to understand what's going on in their world rather than what I think is going on. Now, there are some cases where my observation objectively could support the other person. And that's a skill that us coaches and human beings in relationships bring up. But often I hear that what we are bringing in is, again, the where we've gone into our world and what we think is right. So we have some kind of a attachment to what we're saying. As soon as you feel you've got some kind of attachment to what you're thinking their reality is, you've moved away from co-creating that relationship and trusting environment. You're at danger of reducing trust. So you might be falling back to 1, 2, and 3. So you just want to be aware of that. And when we move to level 5, so we're starting to listen behind the words. There are silences. Silences are amazing. When we create silence, there is a space that we're creating. First of all, we're saying it's okay to be silent. Now, I'm not talking about like 30 seconds of silence. What I'm talking about is just a couple of seconds. And so listening, when we're listening to individuals and we're picking up energy, the words, tonality, intuition, sometimes the quietness allows our brain just to figure out what's going on and to be able to then ask a question or make an observation. We've allowed things to settle down and then be able to say what it is that we really want to say in service of the other person. So what happens when we do this? Well, at level 5, what is it that we're doing? This leads to the other person receiving observations, open-ended questions, powerful ones, feedback that raises awareness. It's really competency 6 of active listening, assisting awareness. Learning, competency 8. Awareness, and then some new learning about me, about the context, about the goal that I've just set. And you're moving them towards the solution. Right? So you can see the three elements come up again here. So at this level 5, we're listening, we know what the goal is. At the same time, we are listening to the relationship of the context and who the person is to align and be able to observe open-ended questions so that the other person sees potentially blind spots or starts to think of a different way of looking at things, and that kind of opens up the energy of the other person towards what it is that they come to the session to get. Often it's something that's either extended what they already knew. It was just like a wider perspective. Sometimes it is just new. It's like, I had never thought of it like that. And that opens up the space, and that's where the competencies ACC, PCC, and then MCC. That now we're moving towards from ACC to PCC. And before we go and talk about strength and wrapping up tonight, I want to just ask you, based on what you've just heard of 4 and 5, the listening levels of 4 or 5, what is some of the insights, learning, or what is it that's added or expanded for you in this section? If anybody wants to share through audio, more than happy to listen to that as well. Thanks, Nitha. Nitha's saying I haven't been able to understand what intuition is in its truest sense. So please bring that question, Nitha, if that is a question you have. Please bring that towards the back end when we're talking the Q&A, and we can talk about that a little bit. Thank you for that. Matt.
Taimur, I just wanted to thank you. In that really short amount of space that you described level 5, there's so much to unpack there that I know I'm going to spend beyond days, weeks and months thinking about that, because how you've described it is actually really, for the first time, starting to open up that level. And it for me, it was really distinct. It was making that, the importance of the client, and it's the client and helping them. That's what we're there to do in service. But it was helping me to better be on the journey of learning about that. So I'm still a little bit, my mind has just gone, whoa, hang on, that was deep for me to understand what level 5 deep listening is. So it was one, it was just to say thank you, but 2, it was that observation of the real distinction and how we can think we're listening at a higher level when actually we're not. And I felt that was really important as well, what you'd said about level 3, which is, you know, a good way to check in with yourself is, have you moved into your world? So you might not think you have, but then go, well, hang on, have I made this some way about me and me advising somehow, solutioning? It's like, right, no, I need to be back and exploring with the client. Where's this actually fitting in? And, you know, why are we overall talking? So it's all also what I think is interesting. It's that relationship between, let's say, major goals and session goals. So again, we get this interplay between right, we're just checking in again. But when we initially got together to, you know, for me to coach you, we had identified these things through, you know, instruments like the Wheel of Life and such. Just checking in for today, you brought this. Let's just test that out in relation to overall where we are. So it's so as I say, I'm gonna jellyfish. I'm gonna park myself there, but thank you, because I'm sitting there kind of like, wow, such useful stuff in such a short space of time.
Thank you, Matt. So I like the way you're linking the longer term goal, the vision the person's had in the program they've signed up for you, and the session they're in. That brings another element of relationship of what's the longer term goal to the session goal, the context now versus past versus where you want to head. And now you want to add who this person really is to that complex set of areas, if you like, that we're listening into. So that's a great cue, Matt, for us to go straight into the strength before we wrap up tonight. And I hand over to Puya. So I want to share with you this element of focus. So when we focus, and we do, so every time you're in a conversation, you are focusing on something. So let's just start from that level. Whenever we are in a conversation, we are focusing on something. Now, if you're focusing on one thing, you can't be focusing on another thing. Some people say, oh, I can multitask. If you are listening to someone and you're listening to someone else, you will miss some nuances here and you will miss some nuances there. No human being, as far as I know, has the capability to pick up everything when they're focused on two. So when you're focusing on one, I'm gonna, I think there's someone that I'm just gonna put on mute, the background noise. So what are you focusing on? This is the question. This is competency number 2, where you are reflecting on asking yourself that question, because only you know. What are you focusing on? Now, here's my level 6. It's a bonus level. So what I believe is that when I focus on the individual's strengths, when I'm going into a conversation, I have the privilege to, first of all, really get to know who that person is. Not from a context of, are they good or bad? From the context of getting to know the person. Not the label, the person. So if I'm going into a conversation and somebody in that conversation is kind of as they're talking to me, their eyesight goes across there, and they're waving at somebody over there, and they're smiling at somebody there, and they're still with me, but they're in other places as well. Now, my initial focus could be, my goodness, this is really annoying, and this person is not respecting our time, and they're not focusing on what we're saying. Or I can focus on their strength. Now, if I've learned what strengths are, and some of you have been on our other programs, and you've heard me talk about this. So if I'm listening to their personality, the who, the identity, if I'm listening to that level, the root, the real kind of deeper level of listening that some of you mentioned, then what I'm really focusing on, I want to understand what are the talents showing up right now? What are the characteristics showing up right now about this person? So that example I just gave, that person, from what I know of strengths, that person's talent is the broad relationships and social diversity. It's a talent. They have it. They may not know it in that way, but they're certainly behaving to demonstrate that that's what drives them. That's the energy that automatically comes up for them. They're not intentionally doing it. It's an autopilot thing. And when I see that and I focus on that strength, first of all, I don't get annoyed. Second of all, I don't go into my head about making a meaning out of this person, it doesn't respect me. What I'm doing is I now understand what's driving that person's energy. Then I can have a conversation based on what I've understood about who the person is, including, if I was their coach, talk about some of the blind spots where the other person's perception of that behavior could get them into trouble, and weakness, where they can't actually get things done to the level they want, simply because the other person's perception of them is that they're rude, they're disrespectful. Now, if the other person, if I'm their coach and they hear that, they see the blind spot, now they have a choice. Now there's an awareness, because I've listened to something very deep, and I know the language to be able to put back. So I can put a word to it, right? And I can then go and check in. You know, I can see that it's important for you to connect with multiple people. Do you have, now if I've worked with them, I will know that they have that talent, because they would have been talking about that in other sessions too. And I will be able to, as a coach, because I've listened to who they are, to pick up where it's serving, because it's moving to their strength. And you know, this particular goal, you know, I know you have that. I know you have that talent. So this goal you have you? So what about that talent in relation to this goal? How can that serve you? So by knowing who they are, I can start doing what I do from a listening and service to a level 6. So this leads to focusing on their talents, how they can be applied in many areas of their life. So sometimes, and the other side is where they need to be aware that by applying it in certain contexts, it may get them into trouble, which means that they are now more aware of making better choices when they go outside the session and they start that transformation, which is the level, the competency 8 of developing themselves. So definition of talent, it really is, it's an autopilot, it's an innate pattern of thought, feeling, behavior. In the dictionary, personality trait says the same thing. It's the autopilot of how you think, feel, and behave. So if somebody's on autopilot and they're behaving in a certain way, and I know I can learn what different behaviors mean or could mean, I will be able to listen and be able to observe and give feedback and have those open-ended questions at a much deeper level. I can make that much deeper impact quicker. Now, as a coach, that's going to increase my income, simply because my sessions, I don't need an hour session. I can do what I used to do in an hour as a PCC in 40 minutes as an MCC. I'm giving you an example where this drives business too. So service, we're here to serve. And if this is our profession, because we're serving and we're very effective, we get a return on that energy and that investment that we've had on the way we've listened. So If you haven't shown up on the strength workshop that we do, come to it. 30th of May is the next one, 3 p.m. UK time. These are the 3 steps we'll be doing. You will get a code to the Gallup's assessment. You'll get a report. You'll be asked by ICE to do a simple exercise prior to coming to the workshop, and then we'll dive into that report and your exercise in identifying your innate talents. Where's your autopilot? Where could you get you in trouble? Where you could use it in circumstances and develop it so that you become strong and produce great results and do things more intentionally, especially on the tasks that are really, really important to you. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to come back to the takeaway and the questions after Puya. So please jot down your questions and insights before you forget them, and we'll come back and we'll have a conversation together. Thanks for listening, guys. Great. So, well, we're at that stage where you can share your insights of what you've taken away tonight. You can also ask questions. I know there was some questions in the chat, and I asked that you bring them to this section. So I am happy to for you to kind of raise your hand. I can call upon you. You can ask the question yourself or share the insight, or you can put it in the chat and I'll read it out, and hopefully I'll be able to add some value there. So I trust that some of you who were asking questions before are still here. I know a few people have dropped off. So let me just see what, okay, so thank you, Puya. So Claudia has said, can someone please explain how would you reflect that back to them? I'm not quite sure what that is. What's the context? Claudia says it was answered afterwards. Okay, so cool. So you got your answer. That's awesome. Tracy, can we ask the client what their strengths are? Absolutely, you can ask them what their strengths are. So, so Tracy, when we talk about strengths, let's just remind ourselves what strengths are. When you ask somebody, what is your strength? The language that at ICE we use, I'm a Gallup certified strength coach. So I use the Gallup assessment, and the language that assessment is highlighting what the characteristics mean when we do our strength development methodology. So we have a language to talk to each other about, and then we go to the depth of how can we actually make the impact. So when we say strength only comes about when you are doing a particular activity so that you are producing a positive outcome consistently. That's when we know we are in our strength. Now, as human beings, we're driven towards certain activities and we're not driven towards other certain activities. If we're driven towards an activity, it's the characteristic, it's the talent at play that is giving you the energy to go towards that activity. It's what you think that activity involves. And by thinking that activity involves 1, 2, 3, if your characteristic is aligned with that, your energy is up and you want to volunteer and you want to go into it and you want to stay into it. So once you go into the activity, initially you may not be producing positive outcomes consistently. But if your talents are at play, you will learn very quickly. And by learning very quickly, you will produce positive outcome quicker and more repetition. And eventually, very soon, it will become consistent, positive outcomes consistently, most of the time. Now, when that happens, you're in your strength. So can you see there's two steps to that process? The first step is the energy. It's the motivation. It's the driving force. The second step is where you're developing the driving force. You're developing the talent so that it becomes a strength. Because when you develop the talent, it learns skills, knowledge, experience by repetition, and then you become strong. By knowing that definition and understanding that, then when you ask someone, your client or someone at work or your kids, whoever you're talking with, then you can be more specific in the question you're asking, Tracy. So you could be asking, how does it feel when you're doing this activity, this task? They say, this feels awesome. Say, what is it about this activity that feels awesome? The fact that I'm surrounded with new people and I'm getting to know new people all the time. That's that talent we were just talking about earlier, right? If that person's got that talent, then the kind of activity is giving them that drive. And then you can ask them, so for the outcomes you want to achieve, how can you develop using this energy so that you become even better at producing the results? What you're really asking them is, how can you get to that strength where you're doing what you're doing and you're producing positive outcomes consistently? You're asking it in a way where it's aligned with the person's language. So you're the co-creating relationship and you're communicating effectively. But behind that, it's the knowledge that you have as a coach that says, I can hear the talent, I can hear the energy and motivation. I heard him or her talk about what they're doing to get to the outcome. I hear some blind spots. I hear some areas where they're not the answers they want or the outcomes they want is not as quite as high as what they want. So now I'm going to ask about what they can do to develop competency 8. Right? You're asking them what is it that they can do in relation to using their talents more, developing those talents by adding the knowledge and skills, etc. they need. For example, if the person picks up some coaching skills, then when they're going to talk to people, multiple people, they're going to listen more effectively, quickly pick up the nuances, and they will be able to connect with the other person, build trust with the other person that much faster and more effectively. They may be able to have that communication towards development if that communication needs it. So by having that and the talent, wow, that person is going to do wonders, and they're going to go towards the strengths more and more until they're there. So I trust that that explanation helped, Tracy. Neither said, what does intuition mean in its truest sense? So intuition, so I'm not quite sure its truest sense. This is my take on it. So intuition is something that comes from you, the listener. So it's what it is that it's some people call gut feel. Some people say it's the unknown, it's the unexplainable that I know is. So when you are picking up messages, your inner world, so this is the listener, so this is me, the coach. If I'm picking up signals intuitively, that means there's something that I can't put my hand on it and kind of put a sentence on it, but I got the feeling, I got the gut feel, and it's telling me there's something behind what that person just said. And if I think the relationship of that gut feel is going to support the other person and is in relation to the topic that they brought to the session, I'm going to play on it. I'm going to say, look, there's a gut feel. I have a feeling. Not quite sure if it's correct, but here, the feeling is what you just said. There's something else behind it. Is it true? So I'm not coming from a perspective that I know. It's sharing something of value or potential value. I hope that makes sense, Neetha. So I think we're getting close to me handing over to Priya for the next section. But let me just see if we can put the raffle up and have one other question, not raffle, but the poll that we want you to just have a look at what it is that's happened today. What do you think about the content and the delivery? We love feedback and what we can improve. So love to hear your thoughts on that. And also another question that we've put out there in terms of where your next set of development is. So I'm just going to put that, I'm going to launch that poll. I'd really appreciate it if you answer the 2 questions in there. And I'm going to go to, while you're doing that, I'm going to go to Louise's, I think there's a question there. So let me read it and see if I can help in any way. So Louise is saying, I'm so sorry, I have to drop off, but really would love. Oh, so it's about, so some people want to know about recordings, and I noticed that earlier on as well. Just be assured that we're recording this session. We will adjust the recording so the content of it can be delivered, and we'll put it in our YouTube, and we'll send the link out so that you have access to that. Right, so let's see if there's. Right, so there is Tamara question. If you're using these skills as a manager, at what point, at one point, it may be required that you take on manager or mentor hat and remove the coach hat. I suppose at that point, giving advice, teaching person is acceptable after enough of listening and understanding. Yeah, so here's how this is how I would approach it. As a manager, we have multiple roles. Coaching style and coaching competency and mindset is going to help me as a team leader, manager, in whatever role I play. Because in my belief is coaching is a life skill. So when I'm training, so as a trainer, I use coaching skills. When I'm a team leader and I have to be directive, I'm also using my coaching skills. So I can be using coaching skills in whatever role I have. So here's the question from Tamara. As a manager, can I take this hat off and put this other hat on? So if I'm in a coaching mode where my team members come into the room and I'm having a coaching session in order for their development, for example. I'm curious. I want to understand where their strengths are based on their terms of what strength is for them. I'm there to listen to what they really need and match it with the potential that there is there, that I can put them in the role and responsibility. So I'm in that session, right? Now, at some point as a manager, I may believe that if I give advice, it's going to support the other person and me and the team. Or I need to teach this person something. So for example, somebody's come in and they just don't know how to use Excel in a certain way, right? I'm not going to coach them to use Excel. I'm going to teach them how to use Excel. However, as I'm communicating with them, I'm not going to let go of listening at the level where I want to understand, as I'm training them, teaching them, how are they picking this up? So I'm going to ask for for understanding. How have you learned this? What does it mean to you now? So I'm not going to stop using those skills. So I think there's a distinguishing factor of how, what is it that you're doing as a manager when you're in a conversation where you're using the skills to raise the other person's awareness. You're asking them about how they would do it. So you're kind of there to accelerate and push them forward, or you may be playing other roles. So being aware of that role and still seeing where you can bring your own coaching abilities to support the new role is also potentially helpful for that relationship and outcome. I trust that helps. I'm going to pass on to Puya to do the raffle and wrap up tonight.